I think the temptation is to build the faux village of Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube um, as your source.
Mm,
Like, what does the website say, or what does Google
mm.
say? And it's like, okay, that's good, but it, just as big is the combined wisdom of the village around you.
Yeah. Hello and welcome to this episode of the Dad Dialogue podcast. I am your host, Lawrence. Quick reminder, you can go over to daddialogue.co.uk, click on contact. There is a sign up form there. You can fill that in if you would like to come on the show yourself. I would love to hear from you. Today's guest is Darcy. I've known Darcy for a few years now, and he is been a great mentor to me in the early stages of my marriage. And he works alongside his wife in lots of different roles, actually, helping people with marriages, helping people become great leaders. I'll let him explain a little bit more about what he does in the episode. Darcy is the first grandfather we've had on the show, so I'm super excited to talk to him about the ways in which he has instilled his values and his beliefs with his children, and then how he hopes that will impact his grandchildren as well. He has a lot of wisdom to share with us today, and you'll notice throughout the episode there's a lot of the theme of intentionality. So as you're listening, have a little think about how we can all be a little bit more intentional being great dads and great husbands and maybe great grandfathers as well. Let's get into the conversation. I was wondering, do you have like an elevator pitch for explaining what you do for like when someone asks you? Because I feel like this must have developed over the years.
Oh, okay. Well, four things, all to do with developing leaders.
Mm.
Number one is we've got a historic charity in Asia that we work with high school, college, a number of churches that are connected to this historic mission. So I lead that charity. The second thing that my wife and I do together is called Zoe Network, and she directs it and I assist her in that. And it's really about developing women and men as leaders, and then mostly connecting Canadians to the needs of women around the world and seeing about meeting some of those needs,
Mm.
which is very fulfilling. Number three is my wife and I do a lot of marriage seminars and conferences. Been married for almost 35 years, and
Wow.
that's been something that we've done for a number of years, and it just keeps growing. And maybe like we still love each other, right? So people kind of want to go, well, how does that happen?
Mm.
Um, and the fourth thing that we do is we coach and mentor leaders in all kinds of
Mm.
places around the world. So four big things, overwhelming at times, but we make it.
Mm. So over the years, there's been, I'm sure each of those things has probably been a little bit different, looked different. They might have started at different times. Can you tell us a little bit about what life looked like when you had your kids?
Yeah. Um, so we we had our kids when we were young. We were young parents. I think 3 years into marriage, we
Mm.
had our first one, and then 15 months later, we had our second one,
Wow.
and then 2 years later, we had our third one. So we've got a son, a daughter, and a son: Nick, Robin, and Benjamin. And life was a little bit out of control in when we had our daughter. And that was a kind of a key moment in our marriage. I remember the moment where my wife came up to me and said, "Okay, Darcy, I'm not leaving, but we're just friends." That's all I got. And I'm like, "Holy smokes!" And I'd been working way too many hours,
Mm.
and not been there. Um, so we made some pretty significant adjustments as a couple and as a
Mm.
family during that season. So life was chaotic and crazy. Um, my Leanne, my wife, we made the choice together for her to be a stay-at-home mom, which was an interesting decision financially, because at the end of each month there was only $17 left after the
Wow.
bills were paid, so it was tight. I had to get creative in terms of doing little side hustles and that kind of stuff to make it work. That was a good decision.
Mm.
in those days, but I needed to learn some things.
I think we all do sometimes, don't we? Well, oftentimes.
sometimes I'm still learning.
we're all on the. That's what we're here for, right? And we're all trying to learn together.
That's right.
That's really interesting. And so, what were you doing at this time for work? Was it a similar, like, to kind of lead into what you're doing now, or was it something completely different?
Yeah, it was. I was a youth pastor and
Mm.
assistant pastor at a church, and so we had all kinds of youth activities going on. I was working with students and preteens, and then church services and practices, and so there were most nights of the week I was out, which wasn't a good thing because I was still going for it during the day. So the number of hours that I was working to try and make the job work there was a little bit of overkill there.
Mm.
Yeah, we say that season I felt guilty because I wasn't there. Leanne felt guilty because she she was frustrated with me not being there, and so we both felt guilty. It wasn't it wasn't a great atmosphere in our house, even though
Mm.
I was a spiritual person. That wasn't good. Had to make some adjustments, and we did make some good adjustments.
But that must be challenging with a young family in tow to make those adjustments, because you said that was around the time of your daughter, so then not soon after the
Yeah,
third comes along. So,
yeah. So it was interesting. Like I had the freedom to divide my work day into thirds, which was a good decision. So if I was going to be
mm,
out in the evening, all evening, I would take the morning off or the afternoon off,
right.
and that was a good kind of boundary for us as a family. And we also made the decision, and many cannot do this for their work, but I was able to take our kids and Leanne along on many of our youth activities. And that, I was more tired by the end of the night because there's competition, but it was very interesting how that fed into our work. Like now, 30 years later, I still keep in contact with those kids who are now, 40 plus years old. But do they remember, a single one of my talks? No, they don't. They don't remember that. But what they do remember is me as a dad, me as a husband, Leanne as a
Mm,
like they remember that because many of them didn't have that,
mm,
and so it became really significant. So we made a few of those adjustments that we could make in our situation, and it actually it gave us this piece where we said, okay, this isn't working, but what could we do? So that became a key
mm,
question in our marriage and in our family. What could we do? Like Leanne and I say that we're all leaders, all of us. We have influence. We have
mm,
influence in our family and in our marriage. And so what could we do? Like, and
mm,
there's always little things that you can tweak and sometimes big things.
mm. Did you have a village, so to speak? I've been curious about this term recently, talking to other dads and how they are yearning for a village to lean on
Mm,
to help raise their kids. Would you say you had that village?
yes. And it was intentional. Like
Mm,
for that first season, we actually moved 17 hours away from family, and so we were up in northern British Columbia, away, and so family
mm,
was a 17-hour drive away. And so starting there, we started to intentionally build friendships and relationships, and it was interesting. It wasn't all people our own age,
mm.
which is that's the temptation, just hang out with people your own age. But we would actually hang out with people who were ahead of us and watch and learn.
Yeah.
We made friends with some grandmas, and those grandmas came and helped us with our kids and loved on us and our kids and ate popcorn and got it all over the carpet, and it was it was beautiful, like to build
Mm.
that sense of family. And like for us, having a church family, that was a natural place for that to happen. And then we
Yeah.
also engaged in community groups. I think you mentioned that you are in a dad's group. Well, Leanne found a mom's group, and those relationships were super life giving. Like, but
Mm.
intention was the big thing. And as our kids grew, and later we moved down more towards the urban part of Canada. Again, we built a community of parents and mentors and young adults and grandpas and grandmas around our kids intentionally. Like
Mm.
we would actually meet with young adults who we knew and admired and felt like their life was on a good trajectory, and we'd say, could you take our preteen or our just teen out for coffee like once a month? Like, we'll pay for the coffee, but can you do that? And
Mm.
just encourage them. And
Yeah.
they did. Like, how cool is that? So that village piece was massive. And I say to parents, like, do that. Don't just rely on YouTube or Instagram, but like get out with real people. And
Yeah.
the grandpas and grandmas in the community around you are worth their weight in gold. The uncles and aunts, and in all that, like we we did it all carefully because they're your kids, and so you were careful in how you did that, what that looked like, and made sure our kids were always in safe places.
Yeah.
But village for sure.
And now that you and your wife are a part of your children's village for your now grandkids, how do you see it from their perspective? Do you think it's easier or harder for your children to be building their village now?
I think the temptation is to build the faux village of Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube as your source. Like, what does
Mm.
the website say, or what does Google say? And it's like,
Mm.
okay, that's good, but it, just as big is the combined wisdom of the village around you.
Yeah.
And how can you do this together? Because you need each other. Don't try and do it all by yourself. So
Mm.
it's fun. Like today, our daughter's doing an interview, and so it's like you can see my wife in the background and maybe hear little noises, or we are with our grandson and being part of that village for her. And the only boundary we set is you got to feed us lunch.
That's a good boundary to have.
So, but yeah, I think the temptation now is really about isolation,
Yeah.
and isolate with your phone or your computer, and it's like, no, 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 get out and be with people and rub shoulders with
Mm.
people and have conversations that aren't a sentence long, but have conversations that are
Mm.
that are deep and meaningful, and learn from each other and watch other parents and how they do stuff, and pick out the best, and read the stuff that you don't like. But yeah, that
Mm.
village piece is just as important, and probably requires more intention than we had to, because it's much easier to Google.
Yeah. No, I totally can relate to that. And I think, yes, a lot of the parents that I know, they're trying to educate themselves to such a high standard to feel as though they have all the answers when we're not made to have all the answers. We're made to do life together and to have different personalities that can complement one another. But like you said, it's the intention that can be more challenging for parents to step out into. So you just mentioned your grandson there. Let's talk a little bit about your grandkids. You have, is it 5 total grandchildren?
Yep, five. We had two until last summer, and then we had three. All three of our kids had kids within
Wow.
a 2 month span. It was intense, Lawrence. It was.
Wow. That is really intense. Wow. My next question was, are they close in age?
Yeah. So those three are within in 2 months of each other, and then there's a 4-year-old and soon to be 4-year-old. So
Okay.
uh, we actually had said to our kids, knowing that you can't really make these things happen, but we said when you get married, if you can try to have your children close together, it will make a difference on your family, like the community
Wow.
around you, because you'll all be going through the
Yeah.
same stages at the same time, and you'll have the kids will have cousins.
Yeah. They did you proud then.
They did, and it wasn't all an easy journey. There were
Yeah.
some losses in there and lots of tears and lots of prayer, but we're really grateful for our the five who are with us. It's very
Mm.
special.
So knowing that you've moved around a little bit, are all of your children and grandchildren living in a similar area to you, or are they a bit more spread out?
We've got two that we're in Abbotsford, Canada, basically about 6 months a year, with travel out and about. And we've got two of our kids that live in Abbotsford, and then we have one. Our youngest son is about 12 hours drive away from us,
Right.
in another city. So
Do you actively think about how to kind of balance your time between like your kids? If do you ever find yourself spending time with ones that are closer to you just because it's more convenient, or do you kind of have a more intentional aspect towards those relationships?
yeah, I think nobody has kind of complained about fairness at this
Mm.
juncture. Like we've again intentional pop as I am affectionately known, and Grammy.
It's cute.
We make videos for our grandkids. Uh, we have a community of stuffed animals that sit on a shelf in wherever we are. They travel with us, and they have
Wow.
conversations with those grandkids. So, like it's actually pretty crazy because wherever we are in the world, we're doing FaceTime and is helpful, and we do intentionally make our way. We'll be making our way to the next province over. We'll do that 12-hour drive that's starting tomorrow to be with our kids and grandkids. What I what I'd say is that visiting our son and daughter-in-law in the next city over, you're you're living with them, and so we may see them for a week, but a lot happens in a week in a home.
Mm.
Whereas our kids who are close by will see them over for a meal or a picnic or watching their kids or whatever, and so it it actually feels like the same amount of connection, just different.
That's interesting to hear because obviously I have a similar situation being further abroad, and then both I and my wife have kids
Yeah,
in the family from other siblings. So it's not something, yeah, like you said, your kids have never questioned fairness. I don't think anyone would ever think about fairness, but I wonder as a grandparent if that thought comes in. But it's good to hear that you have your things in place to be intentional about building those relationships through technology, which is really cool. So I read something about I think it was your blog or your email blast about having to interrupt a speaking engagement because you were getting a call from the spouse of a sibling, a spouse of your
yeah,
child,
yeah,
and
yeah.
it said in there that you had made that decision to strive to be reachable no matter where you're traveling, no matter what time it is. What led to making that decision, and how important do you think a decision like that is for a family?
Yeah, that was really interesting. The situation was we were speaking at a marriage conference
Mm.
and just winding down, and we used our iPad for our notes, and we actually were going to just start an exercise, a modeling conversation communication exercise. That was our topic, was communication, and all of a
Mm.
sudden, all of our devices lit up, and I looked down and I'm like, what do we do? And they all lit up, and it wasn't our daughter, it was our son-in-law. And it's like, I think we need to take that. And so
Mm.
Leanne went off the stage and found a quiet room, and I kept going. Like it was, so we continued our work, but we said, listen, we're just taking a call from one of our kids. It seems like there's something that's happening, and we made that commitment. And we'd seen that in our village. There had been another older couple, older than us, and they had kids and grandkids, and we had been visiting with them and having it was like an informal meeting, but all of a sudden the phone rang, and the grandma got up and left the room. And I was like, what is she doing? Like, I thought we were having a meeting, and she's just gone. And then she comes back and she says, that was my granddaughter. And we made a promise to each other that when our grandkids or kids called, we would always answer whenever possible, even if it was just to say, hey, grandma's talking to somebody right now, can I call you back in a few minutes? But to always be available for family. And so we have practiced that. There's been a few times where it's been tricky to do that. But that's been a very good practice, because we want our kids and our grandkids to know that wherever we are there for them as well. They have the right to break past our do not disturbs. So we learned that from our village and put it into practice.
That's cool. And so was that decision made specifically when you guys were traveling, or did you just implement it when you were still kind of closer together? Or
yeah, it was before we just moved to spending part of our time in Asia. Like, we just saw after that conversation with those grandparents, our village, we came away and we said, I think we need to do that.
Yeah.
And so we started that. That call, it was like, it's 4 a.m. where they're calling from. And he's called each of our phones. We missed the first call. Now it's the second. We better take it.
Yeah.
It's scary, but yeah.
I think that's really a really good reflection on making decisions as a family and just putting things in place that benefit everyone, and just having that upfront communication of, this is something that's going to happen. I don't know if you call it a rule or a boundary or what have you. It's just a value, I guess. Like, your value is that you're always reachable for your children and your grandchildren when they become, old enough to have a phone.
Yeah.
But no, I think that's really admirable, and I think it's just a reminder for every parent out there to think about the things that can be done intentionally and proactively.
Like, your work won't remember you.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, seriously. Like, when you're done, like, they'll give you a party and you'll be on your way. But your kids and your grandkids, your spouse, they like, it's a legacy that you leave for generations. So what will you invest in them, and how will you make, like, yes, we have to work to make money and work to make a difference in the world and do good things, but our primary role is that legacy to our kids, and then to our grandkids and their kids, so that generationally, like, you make an impact.
Yeah. And I think what I'd like to get into is, when we're talking about these boundaries and these values to put in place, you have a lot of experience with marriage counseling, and you spoke a little bit about having to kind of make those changes early on when your kids were around. Is there another kind of value that you would say that you've put into place with Leanne that would be recommended, or something that you think is really impactful? It's kind of similar to what you were saying with this, like, contacting with kids. Is there something else that's proactive, not in response to something, just something that you think is beneficial that other listeners could hear? Because I think we all know, as fathers, we can be the best father by being, at first, a great husband. And I think if you're not being a great husband and you're not modeling love and patience and kindness towards your wife, then it's very difficult for that to pass on down to the kids.
Yeah. So much is caught rather than explicitly said, right? Like, the vibe that's going on in your home. No, we again, intentionally, we started, I think, at about year 10 in our marriage, to work through what are our values. And it's weird. Like, in a company, you have your mission and your values and your vision, and you'd be like, why would I ever do that kind of exercise, team building exercise, in our marriage and family? But to get explicit to be on the same page. Wow, that was a big deal for us, and we actually take couples through that journey of, okay, what are your values? And so Leanne and I have, I think it's 8 or 9 values that we've worked on, defined. And so if I'm not there and there's a big decision that needs to be made, or if Leanne's not there and there's a big decision that has to be made, I can look at this grid, this values grid that we've built, and make a good decision without each other knowing that these are our values.
Were those 8 or 9 things decided kind of at once, or was that a growth over time?
Like I got all excited. I started writing them down, and then I presented them to Leanne over coffee, and she said, "That's not a value." Like so there was an interrogation. There was discussion.
Like, what are you talking about?
Yeah, exactly. There was there was friction, and we wrestled over not just a single coffee, but over walks. Like we kept working on it, and it's a living document, right? So we looked at our values, and it's been very, very good for us. We frankly really believe in that. And so when there's a big decision coming about job or life change or location change or whatever, like we run it through the grid of our values. Does it fit? Does it align? Can we do that?
I'm wondering, as a dad that's now welcomed in grandchildren, you've seen your children get married happily. I'm trying to take you back to when they were maybe teenagers.
Yep.
How did you kind of toe the line of wanting to model being a great husband and dad, effectively teach what you wanted to teach? I'm sure you must have had so much that you wanted to teach them, but was there ever an aspect of, if I go too far, they're going to kind of go back a little bit? I think this is something that a lot of dads of younger kids think about for when the dreaded preteen and teen phase comes in.
Yeah, I mean, we were not perfect parents, right? Like we were just not. There was lots of mistakes made, but there were some things that we did during the teen years that were great. Again, we made sure we had some mentors, some people who were ahead of us, who had teens who were flourishing, and so we asked them questions. I remember one of the guys, his name was Al, looking at me and said, "Why are you so scared about the teen years? Like, go in believing that it's going to be great. Like, change your attitude from fear to belief that you've got this." And I was like, "Oh yeah, I guess we've been looking at this rather negatively." And it was a good shift during those years. In order to help with our finances, we would let out one of our bedrooms to a student, and we had people living with us, usually 18, 19, 20, 21 year olds. And inevitably, we ended up helping that kind of finish off the parenting, like all the things that they didn't know we would help them with. And so out of that, it was like, oh, these are the things that an 18, 19, 20, 21-year-old need to know. And so we made a list and started working through the list with our kids. Okay, they need to know how to do laundry. They need to know how to have a budget. When do we give them a budget? How do we teach them how to do that? They need to know what it's like to go on a first date. And so the first date, the boys will take mom out. And it was really hard because like our son's like, "Why do I have to take my mom on a date?" And I'm like, "Because your dad, his first couple dates were so bad. We don't want to repeat that. Like we want you to have a little more success." And so then he takes his mom out, and she comes back and she says, "That's the best date I've been on in years." And I'm gonna bring it. No, but again, like it feels like the theme of our conversation today, Lawrence, is intentionality. It was like, okay, what do I want, or what do we want for our family, and how are we going to build that in? And so there were hard conversations it was actually pretty interesting to say to the kids, like, Christmas would come and the gifts that we would give to our kids would be not as much as their friends, and we just didn't have the resources to do that. But we said, what are one of our values is generosity, and so although we can't give you these things that you were wanting that maybe would cost a lot, we did decide to do this for someone else. Like, and are you okay with that? And start to include them in some of those decisions. And now, as we debriefed our kids at the end of it, it's like, so what was good about growing up in our family, and what was hard? They said it was hard going back to school with when your friends would get all those kind of big presents and you wouldn't. But we don't regret it, and now it shaped them in terms of who they are with their kids. It's not about the great big gifts. Yeah. Does that? Sorry, I kind of wandered a bit there. I like the.
It's fine. That's what we're here for. It's the whole point. But yeah, I agree. Intentionality seems to be a theme running through what we're talking about. So I've heard from lots of dads that an aspect of their parenting is formed on their experiences with their own father. You know, whether that be a good thing they want to carry through, want to replicate, or maybe a bad thing that a behavior they want to specifically avoid doing. I think we've spoken a little bit about things that you want your kids to emulate. We sounded like you've shared a few things. So if there's anything else that you think that you would like your kids to emulate, and likewise, is there anything from your parenting that you can think back on that you would want them to not emulate or not copy?
Yeah, I think like we've talked to our kids about space and rest and boundaries, and they have heard that because I made mistakes on that early on, so we didn't want them to emulate that. I didn't want my boys to emulate me in terms of how afraid I was to go for counseling and have somebody help me. There's I don't know. It wasn't pride. It was actually fear that somebody would see the inside of me and not like it.
Right.
Fear of being exposed. And once I worked past that with Leanne's help and with the help of a counselor, that was a big deal. Like, it was very transformative for me. And so to have our kids not be scared or too proud for help. So those things, the community piece, we've talked to them about. We've talked to them about our faith, obviously, and that's been special to see each of them kind of grab hold of faith for themselves, and now see that with our grandchildren, and that becomes a piece of bedrock for our family foundation. It's very, very powerful to have our faith in God and his help in all of it. So our kids saw us, like, when things got hard, when things were difficult, they saw us ask God for help, and God came through. And now they do the same.
Wow.
So the spiritual part of us is something that we wanted them to emulate, and they did.
Again, I think like we've been talking, the intentionality is clearly there, but I also like just how you've spoken so much about the modeling and the looking and the seeing and the learning from seeing things. Is not like a case of it doesn't sound like you're being intentional about, teaching and putting yourself on one side of the barrier. It's kind of like just bringing them all along for the journey and showing and opening up. I think we can kind of start to wrap up there, unless you have any other piece of advice you'd like to give for any other dads out there, any pearls of wisdom.
It's worth doing. It's worth being a good dad.
Yeah.
To have the opportunity to invest in a son or a daughter and speak words of life and love into them. it sharpens you. Like for me to be a good dad, I have to be disciplined in my life. Like I have to, I have to show up in my life because they see everything I do. I have to show up in my marriage. And you're right, Lawrence, where like we actually told our kids that being married well is more important. Like mom and I are more important than you guys. Sorry. Like, so we're going to go on dates. We're going to have quality time together and we love you. But this is more important. And when this is good,
Yeah.
then you guys will be safe and it'll be good. So yeah, I could go on and on.
I'm sure we could, but the
Sorry.
listeners they might faint off a little bit. But it's always the same. It's always the same with these chats. People
Yeah.
could go on for long, and I think that's the pinnacle of dads. We do want to talk about it. We do want to share, open up, and just come along for the journey. I think we do want to talk about it. So, thanks so much for opening up and sharing with us. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks, Lawrence. I hope it was helpful.
I really was. And there we have another Dad Dialogue conversation. I'd like to extend a huge thank you to Darcy for taking the time coming on the show and talking to us. I think something I found really interesting was how important he found the idea of having other parents, other people in your life that are a few years ahead of you in the journey to learn from and be a part of that village. So I think that's a really important thing that I'm going to take away from the conversation. If you'd like to find out more about the company that he and his wife lead, there'll be a link to that in the description. It's called Zoe. And I hope you join us again soon for another episode of the Dad Dialogue podcast. Again, if you'd like to sign up, become a guest yourself, daddialogue.co.uk. Have a great day. Goodbye.